Yeah, big.
Big.
Across America's vast farmlands, wild boars have become a nightmare for thousands of farmers. With massive muscle, razor-sharp tusks, and an almost uncontrollable breeding rate, they cause more than $2.5 billion in damage every year. From Texas to the southern states, enormous herds tear through cornfields, destroy irrigation systems, and smash fences apart in just a few nights. Even worse, they are becoming smarter and adapting faster to nearly every control method humans throw at them. First, many people believe hunting rifles would solve the problem. But it didn't take long for the boars to change their behavior. They began moving later at night and almost vanished whenever they heard unfamiliar sounds. After hunting efforts failed, many control teams turned to leg traps hidden deep in the woods. Some animals were captured successfully, but the method quickly revealed its biggest weakness. It only caught individual boars while the rest of the herd kept breeding and destroying farmland. That forced control teams to move towards systems large enough to contain entire sounders at once.
Whoa!
Yeah, big.
Big.
Yeah.
No big.
These giant circular traps are reinforced like steel vaults, because once the gate slams shut, hundreds of kilograms of muscle come crashing into the metal frame in total panic. A fully grown boar can easily bend steel tubing or break weak welds if the structure isn't strong enough.
Ooh, they moved my pen around.
We want to put the rest of the screws.
That's why every bolt, hinge, and connection point has to be heavily reinforced. For control teams, keeping the entire herd inside matters far more than capturing only a few isolated animals. But success depends on far more than the trap itself. Location is everything. Wild boars usually follow fixed travel routes between dense forest cover and open farmland. Control teams track footprints, mud wallows, and torn up ground to locate what they call the herd's invisible highways. Choose the wrong spot, and the boars may disappear from the area for weeks. In many cases, understanding movement patterns becomes even more important than the weapons themselves. Once the location is confirmed, the baiting phase begins. Dry corn is mixed with old beer, spoiled milk, and fermented fruit to create a powerful scent capable of traveling for miles through humid air. The bait is scattered in trails leading deeper and deeper into the trap, so the herd slowly becomes comfortable with the strange metal
strawberry
structure
jam left to rot for 5 days.
in the
The
middle
stench
of
carries
the
2 miles.
For days, sometimes weeks, the gate remains completely open. No lights, no sudden noise. Just absolute patience to convince the herd the area is safe. Then the final moment arrives. As most of the herd moves inside, cameras and motion sensors immediately alert the control team. Within seconds, the heavy steel gate slams shut. After a brief moment of silence comes the chaos, screaming, flying mud, and violent impacts shaking the entire steel frame. Response teams have to move quickly before the herd breaks free or destroys parts of the trap itself.
Alright guys, we
AT, the processing site. Every animal is checked for disease before the meat enters production. Unlike mass-produced industrial pork, wild boar meat is often handled more carefully to preserve its natural quality. The dark red meat, lean texture, and distinctive flavor have made it increasingly popular in high-end restaurants. For some chefs, it represents a raw, untamed taste that commercial pork simply cannot replicate. But that's where the paradox begins. The more people crave wild boar meat, the more economically valuable these animals become. What was once considered an ecological disaster is slowly turning into a profitable food industry. And in the middle of this ongoing battle, one question still remains. Are humans truly protecting the ecosystem, or simply turning another part of nature into business? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe for more survival battles between humans and the wild.
get on that trailer. Get on the bus. Yep. Yep.
Bears do not appear with loud noises in the middle of the night. Their presence often begins with very subtle signs that are easy to overlook without careful observation. A large footprint pressed deep behind the house. A trash can lid slightly displaced. Long scratch marks across a wooden door. All are enough to notice, but not enough to cause immediate concern. The farm owner sees these signs but chooses to ignore them, reassuring himself that it was just a passing visit. Perhaps the bear will not return. The prolonged silence allows the risk to quietly grow without being recognized. As time passes, the level of danger becomes more apparent. The bear no longer stays at the edge of the area but moves closer into human living spaces. Its range expands from the backland to areas near livestock pens and food storage. The frequency of appearances increases night after night. Under motion sensor lights, the bear moves slowly but no longer keeps its distance as before. Familiarity makes it less reactive to the surroundings. When wildlife begins to adapt to human presence, the risk of direct encounters becomes clearer and harder to control. It does not take long for this behavior to become a habit. The bear begins returning along fixed routes, repeating almost the exact time and location where food was previously found. These visits are no longer random but follow a clear pattern. As the signs repeat consistently, trap deployment begins. The bear approaches the familiar area, gradually moving toward the bait without recognizing the risk. The distance to the trap door narrows. Tension builds as each step may determine the outcome. The moment of activation is approaching. To fully understand this situation, it is necessary to examine the underlying cause. Bears do not naturally seek out humans if their habitat remains stable. When natural food sources decline, they are forced to look for easier alternatives. Residential areas become reliable sources of food, from waste to livestock feed. A keen sense of smell allows bears to detect food from long distances. Once they successfully access it, they remember the location and return. This behavior is not random but a survival response to environmental change. Once the behavior is clearly identified, trap deployment is carried out with precision. The trap is placed directly along the bear's familiar travel route. The cage is firmly secured to the ground to prevent movement. The interior space is wide enough for the bear to enter naturally without suspicion. Bait is placed deep inside to ensure the bear fully steps in. When the bear reaches the correct position, the closing mechanism is triggered. The trap door shuts quickly, leaving no gap. Everything happens within a very short moment. After the trap is activated, the bear is contained inside with no way to escape. The surrounding area is quickly secured to ensure safety. Further handling is carried out according to established procedures to minimize risk. Once the bear no longer returns, the level of damage decreases significantly. Previously affected areas gradually return to a stable condition. However, a successful capture does not mean the risk is completely eliminated. If conditions remain unchanged, similar behavior may occur with other individuals. Controlling bears is not about direct confrontation but about properly managing the environment. When easily accessible food sources are removed, the reason for returning gradually disappears. Maintaining a safe distance helps protect humans and preserve natural balance. When the environment is no longer attractive, bear behavior will change over time. This is a long-term and sustainable solution.
Let's go back to 1992, when black bears across the United States were on the brink of extinction. At the time, their numbers had dropped so dramatically that many biologists feared there would come a day when black bears would exist only in old photographs and fading memories. But the surviving bears endured and became part of one of the most remarkable wildlife recovery stories in modern history. Thanks to their incredible adaptability and resilience, black bears made a powerful comeback stronger than anyone expected. Today, the black bear population has rebounded to nearly 700,000 animals, with most living freely across the vast forests of North America. But this conservation success story has also created new challenges. As bear populations continue to grow, they are bringing increasing problems to farmers and communities living near forested areas. To deal with these issues, wildlife experts and hunting communities have worked together to find ways to balance conservation with population control. One of the oldest methods is bow hunting, a tradition deeply rooted in Native American culture. For many early tribes, hunting was never considered entertainment. It was an essential part of survival and a skill built on patience, discipline, and precision. Hunters often spend days or even weeks scouting, tracking, and preparing before ever taking a shot. Understanding bear behavior and movement patterns is the key to getting close without being detected. Black bears have an extraordinary sense of smell and can detect human scent from miles away. Because of this, hunters must remain extremely careful. Every movement has to be controlled, and every step must serve a purpose. They learn how to blend into the forest, moving silently like shadows to become nearly invisible to one of North America's most intelligent predators. When a bear finally appears, usually within only 20 to 40 yards, every sense becomes completely focused. One small mistake can ruin weeks of preparation in an instant. Meanwhile, in many mountainous and forested regions across North America, bear cage traps have become one of the most widely used methods of population control. Unlike the dangerous traps used decades ago, modern systems are designed to keep the animal secure while wildlife officers or trained specialists arrive on site. Massive steel traps are often placed deep in the woods near known bear travel routes or areas filled with claw marks, overturned rocks, and feeding signs. Inside the trap, Strong-smelling bait such as fish, meat, or sweet pastries is used to attract bears from long distances away. When the massive steel door suddenly slams shut, the entire forest can erupt with deep roaring echoes. But the goal is not simply to capture a single bear. The larger objective is to prevent bears from moving into residential areas, destroying crops, or becoming a danger to nearby communities. Whether using traditional bows or modern cage trapping systems, the most important things remain calmness, responsibility, and respect for nature. Every decision affects the fragile balance between humans and wildlife. And as black bear populations continue to recover across North America, the debate over how humans should coexist with these powerful predators will likely continue for many years to come. So what do you think? Do hunting and population control still play an important role in modern wildlife management? Or should we move toward newer and more humane solutions? If you enjoy real stories about nature, survival, and the challenges people face in the wild, make sure to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your perspective because every opinion and every story helps us better understand the fragile yet powerful connection between humans and the wild world around us.
Between the snow-covered mountains of Montana, more and more grizzly bears weighing hundreds of kilograms are leaving the forests and moving dangerously close to ranches and residential areas. They tear apart food storage sheds, flip over garbage bins, and leave massive footprints right outside people's homes. Even more concerning, the bears are learning exactly where food is easiest to find and becoming harder to control after every encounter with humans. Montana has long been an ideal habitat for both black bears and grizzlies. Vast wilderness regions like Glacier National Park and Bob Marshall Wilderness have allowed bear populations to thrive for decades. With their incredible adaptability, bears can find food almost anywhere, from berries and fish to livestock feed near residential areas. That has made the boundary between the wild and human life increasingly fragile. In areas where bears repeatedly return, wildlife control teams can't simply respond to incidents one by one. Every strategy has to be planned around the animal's travel routes and level of caution. One of the most common methods is using large steel cage traps placed in locations where bears have been spotted multiple times. The goal is not only to control the animal, but also to minimize the risk to both people and the bear itself. The most important factor is not the size of the trap, but the precision of the location. Before setting a trap, control teams often spend days monitoring the bear's movement patterns, from the trails it regularly uses to the way it approaches food sources. Even a small mistake can ruin the entire operation because bears are extremely sensitive to unusual changes in their environment. Tracks in soft soil, tree trunks covered in claw marks, and overturned trash bins all become critical clues when determining where to place a trap. Trails repeatedly used over multiple nights are usually monitored the most closely. Only when the signs are clear enough is bait placed deep inside the control zone, forcing the bear to fully enter the trap instead of approaching cautiously and walking away. However, not every bear reacts the same way. Bears that have previously encountered humans or escaped earlier control operations often become extremely cautious. They can detect even the slightest changes around familiar areas and immediately avoid them. In those cases, large cage traps are no longer effective, and control teams are forced to use more discreet methods to avoid triggering suspicion. One commonly used method is a cable snare trap placed along the bear's regular travel routes. The system is carefully concealed with dirt and dry leaves, so it nearly disappears into the environment. When the bear steps into the exact position, the cable loop tightens instantly and anchors to a fixed point to limit movement. The effectiveness of this method depends heavily on field experience and the control team's ability to camouflage the setup. In the harsh conditions of Montana, bear control has never relied on luck.
Shove or not to shove? That is the question after.
From tracking signs and identifying movement corridors to choosing the right moment for deployment, every step requires patience and days of careful observation. Move too early or leave behind too much human scent, and the bear may completely change its route, making the operation far more difficult. Bear hunting also demands an extremely high level of preparation. In Montana, the use of bait is completely prohibited for ethical and ecological reasons. That forces hunters to rely on terrain, tracking skills, and a deep understanding of bear behavior instead of depending solely on equipment. Across the vast forests of Montana, the confrontation between humans and wild bears continues under constant pressure. It is not just a story about controlling dangerous animals, but also a long-standing challenge of balancing human life with the wilderness. If you found this story interesting, leave a comment and don't forget to follow for more journeys into the harsh wild landscapes of North America. Stretching across the vast fields of central Florida, where the damp soil is constantly torn up as if shaken by a silent tremor, wild boars are no longer just quiet visitors passing through the night. They appear in dense numbers, moving in organized groups, leaving behind trails of destruction that carve through the like invisible cuts. What begins as minor damage can, within just a few days, transform an entire area beyond recognition. The real concern is not the strength of individual animals, but how the entire group operates as a structured system, repetitive, precise, and increasingly unpredictable over time. In the early stages, single traps were deployed with the expectation of quickly controlling the situation. The objective was clear: remove individuals to reduce pressure. However, reality unfolded very differently. Each time one animal was captured, the rest of the group did not return as expected. Instead, they became more cautious, moved more slowly, and observed their surroundings more carefully before approaching. These small traps, rather than solving the problem, unintentionally forced the entire group to upgrade its survival instincts. Recognizing the limitations of the old approach, a new strategy began to take shape, not targeting individual animals, but the entire structure of the group. Large-scale trapping systems were designed as open spaces, with steel posts forming a wide circular perimeter that was not immediately enclosed. There was no element of panic, no sudden snapshot mechanism. Everything was arranged to appear as natural as possible, blending into the environment as if it had never existed. The most critical phase is not when the trap is activated, but the period leading up to it. Bait is placed outside the area, then gradually moved deeper inside over several days. No direct human interference occurs during this process. The herd begins to approach, hesitant at first, but gradually becoming familiar. They enter and exit repeatedly, testing, retreating, then returning. Over time, the boundary between safety and danger begins to fade. Once familiarity reaches its peak, the entire group begins moving into the trap area as part of a normal routine. This is when the human element returns, but not through rushed action. The operator monitors the entire process through camera systems, waiting for a single decisive moment, when every individual is inside the controlled zone. No one remains outside. No hesitation remains. Only then is the decision made. The triggering mechanism is activated remotely, fast, precise, and decisive. A large gate closes, leaving no gap for escape. The action takes only a moment, but it is backed by days, even weeks of preparation. Trigger too early, and part of the group escapes and learns. Too late, and the opportunity may disappear entirely. This is not a race of speed, but a test of behavioral understanding. The entire process demands near total patience. There are no human traces, no direct pressure. The environment remains untouched, as if no intervention has ever occurred. It is this silence that allows the herd to return to its normal rhythm. Except this time, everything unfolds within a carefully calculated structure. When the moment arrives, a single action is enough to conclude the entire extended preparation. The result is not measured solely by the number of animals controlled, but by the complete disruption of the group's movement system. Once that structure is removed, the familiar routes disappear with it. Pressure on agricultural areas decreases significantly, not because each individual is removed, but because the collective behavior has been broken. This demonstrates that the true effectiveness of the trap lies not in its physical mechanism, but in its ability to influence the underlying behavioral system of the entire group.
Bears rarely appear with loud sounds in the darkness of night. They usually approach human living areas quietly, almost without leaving clear signs at first. The first clues are often large footprints pressed deep into the damp soil behind houses, slightly shifted trash can lids, or long scratch marks on wooden food storage doors. These signs appear sporadically, enough to notice, but not enough to trigger immediate caution. Owners often dismiss them, assuming it was just a passing visit. This complacency allows the danger to develop silently. Over time, the level of danger becomes more evident. Bears no longer appear only at the edges of the area, but move deeper into human living spaces. They approach livestock pens, food storage areas, and the backyards of houses. The frequency of appearances increases each night, instead of remaining occasional. Under sensor lights, they still move slowly, but no longer keep a safe distance. Familiarity with the environment makes their behavior more bold. The risk of direct encounters becomes increasingly clear, placing continuous pressure on residential areas. The appearances are no longer random. Bears begin to memorize exact locations, food is available, and follow fixed routes. Each return occurs at nearly the same time, forming a stable cycle. Deterrent measures gradually lose effectiveness and are no longer sufficient to prevent them from coming back. The atmosphere becomes increasingly tense as signs of activity grow denser each night. It becomes clear that this is not a temporary phenomenon, but a repeated pattern forming a long-term threat. But a decrease in natural food sources in the forest forces bears to expand their search range. At the same time, residential areas provide more easily accessible food, such as waste, crops, and livestock feed. Their highly sensitive sense of smell allows them to detect odors from long distances and identify resource-rich locations. Once successful in finding food, their return behavior becomes reinforced and more frequent. This is a survival response to environmental change, gradually shifting bears from random searching to fixed feeding habits in specific areas. Observation is conducted over many consecutive days to accurately determine bear behavior. Footprints, claw marks, and night vision cameras are used to track their familiar movement routes. Areas with high appearance frequency are mapped and evaluated in detail. Based on this data, trap locations are selected with precision rather than randomly. Cages are firmly anchored to the ground to avoid detection. Bait is placed deep inside to lure and attract bears, ensuring they fully enter the controlled zone as planned. The bear returns along its familiar route in the darkness of night. Drawn strongly by the smell of food, it enters the trap area without the caution it once had. Each step takes it deeper inside, and the distance to the exit gradually disappears completely. Once it reaches the central position, it becomes contained within the trap and can no longer retreat. Its reactions become chaotic, but cannot break the prepared structure. In a brief moment, the entire area is confirmed safe after the bear is successfully captured. After the situation is brought under control, the area gradually stabilizes again. However, the risk may return if food sources are not completely removed. Control depends not only on traps, but also on environmental management. When living conditions change, behavior changes accordingly. Maintaining a safe distance between humans and wildlife is essential to reduce long-term risks and preserve ecological balance.
If wild boars stormed into your farm every night and destroyed your crops, what would you do to stop them? For me, that was no longer a simple question. Just 2 days earlier, the largest wild boar eradication operation in the area had delivered results far beyond expectations. Hundreds of wild boars were captured within a short period of time. Massive cage traps kept slamming shut throughout the night, while the violent clanging of metal echoed across the forest. But the most dangerous ones still had not appeared. They were the old dominant boars, incredibly intelligent and always able to avoid ordinary traps. I understood clearly that if they were allowed to survive, the entire herd would quickly return. Fresh tracks continued to appear around the devastated fields, fences kept getting smashed apart, and infrared cameras constantly captured enormous dark figures moving through the night. They no longer rushed recklessly toward food the way they once had. After being hunted repeatedly, the herd had completely changed its movement patterns. They split into smaller groups, circled around dangerous areas, and only appeared at the most unpredictable times. That was why I decided to change the entire plan. Instead of placing only a few isolated traps, this time the entire forest would be surrounded with multiple trap locations. The first trap was set right along the forest edge, where a narrow trail filled with fresh tracks was still deeply pressed into the damp ground. I knew the dominant boar usually passed through this area after dark. That night, the silence felt suffocating. Only the sound of insects echoed through the thick darkness. Then finally, the massive shadow appeared. The dominant boar slowly stepped out from the bushes, moving with extreme caution. Several times it moved forward, then suddenly backed away, making me think it had detected the trap. But in one brief moment when its guard dropped slightly, it stepped a few paces deeper inside. Instantly, the steel door slammed shut with a deafening crash that echoed across the forest. The boar reacted violently almost immediately. It rammed into the metal bars with tremendous force, causing the entire cage to shake violently. The impact echoed through the darkness, making it feel as though the trap could burst apart at any second. But this time, everything had been reinforced far more heavily than before. At another location on the opposite side of the forest, the second trap quickly proved effective as well. Two wild boars appeared at the same time, moving cautiously around the baited area. They constantly sniffed the air and circled the trap several times before finally deciding to step inside. Then only seconds later, the door slammed shut decisively. Both animals immediately panicked, repeatedly smashing into the steel frame from every direction in a desperate attempt to escape. But every exit had already been sealed completely shut. The next morning, I returned to inspect the entire trap system. Even from far away, chaotic noises could already be heard coming from deep within the forest. As I moved closer, the trapped boars reacted aggressively at once. They kept charging into the metal bars, kicking clouds of dirt into the air. I kept a safe distance while quickly checking each trap one by one before handling the situation. But the trap that truly shocked me was the one near the eastern swamp. Inside was not just a few boars, but an entire herd crammed tightly together in the confined space. Massive black bodies slammed into one another and crashed violently against the metal frame, creating a scene unlike anything I had ever witnessed before. The growling, the rattling steel, and the mud being thrown everywhere made the entire scene feel more tense than ever. Only after checking every trap location did I finally let out a deep breath of relief. At the very least, the most dangerous boars had finally been brought under control. The area around the farm gradually became quiet again. And for the first time after many sleepless nights, I felt that this battle was finally under control, at least for now.
In many agricultural areas located near forests, wild boar herds have begun appearing with increasing frequency. They repeatedly move across open land and along the edges of fields. Each herd usually consists of 3 to nearly 10 boars following one another in the same direction before moving deeper into production areas. Residents witness the herds crossing fields before quickly scattering into different locations. Some herds return to the exact same familiar areas for many consecutive days, showing that they have established stable feeding routes and begun expanding their range into nearby regions. Not long afterward, the extent of the damage became clearly visible across large areas. Large sections of land in the middle of fields were dug up, leaving behind long trenches and disturbed soil. Numerous crop rows were trampled, and many areas became almost impossible to restore immediately afterward. What made the situation more serious was that the boars repeatedly returned to the same locations over many consecutive days. In areas near residential zones, lawns and gardens were also heavily torn up after each time the herds passed through. Production areas continued to suffer repeated destruction, while the range of damage gradually expanded into many surrounding locations. After identifying the areas most frequently used by the herds, trap systems began being deployed directly along the main movement routes. Some circular traps were installed in open areas to contain multiple animals at the same time. In addition, rectangular traps were placed along narrow pathways between open ground and crop fields. Steel frames were firmly secured to the ground to withstand strong impacts when the herds panicked. Trap doors were positioned in the direction of the boar's familiar movement routes to make entry appear more natural. After the main structures were completed, bait was placed deep inside to draw the herds fully into the controlled area. While the trap systems remained in position, survey activities continued constantly to monitor the movement patterns of the herds. Helicopters appeared above the heavily affected areas to observe from the air. From this viewpoint, the herd's movement routes gradually became visible between open land and crop areas that had been damaged many times before. The monitoring teams continued checking footprints, feeding grounds, and the paths most frequently used by the herds. Cameras and night observation equipment were positioned along different directions to accurately record the moments when the herds appeared and moved around the trap areas. During the following nights, the entire area surrounding the traps was continuously monitored using cameras and night observation devices. The first boars approached quite slowly, often stopping several times to observe before moving closer to the baited area. They circled around the edges of the traps for a short time before finally stepping inside. Once no danger was detected, the boars behind quickly followed in small groups. The number of animals inside the traps gradually increased after each wave of movement. Before long, many of them began pushing against one another while competing for food in the central area, causing their level of caution to decrease significantly over time. As soon as the right moment appeared, the entire trap system was activated immediately. The steel doors slammed shut extremely quickly and blocked every exit before the herd could react. Only seconds later, the entire area became chaotic as the trapped boars rushed in different directions trying to escape. Some slammed hard into the steel frames, but still could not break through the structures that had been firmly secured beforehand. In many situations, additional traps around the area were also activated one after another to prevent the herd from scattering in other directions. Choosing the correct moment allowed most of the herd to be contained in a single deployment. After the control operation was completed, the boars were kept stable inside the system before being transported away from the area. As the herd numbers decreased, the destructive pressure on agricultural areas gradually declined as well. No longer appearing only secretly at night, many groups of wild boars have now started showing up openly during the daytime across large agricultural areas. Residents constantly see groups of 3 to 10 animals crossing fields before moving deeper into areas with dense crops. They move in clear lines, almost as if they are completely familiar with the area. At times, entire groups appear very close to where farmers are working before quickly scattering toward another location. As the number of boars continues to grow, their range of activity also expands rapidly across surrounding areas. It did not take long for the consequences to become clearly visible on a large scale. Many sections of land were torn up as if they had been plowed by heavy machinery. Rows of crops were flattened across multiple areas. What worried many people even more was that the boars did not appear randomly, but continuously returned to the same locations. Some fences were bent or knocked out of place after the groups charged through them. Residents tried using lights, loud noises, and many other methods to drive them away, but the results did not last long. As soon as the area became quiet again, the boars returned as if they had never been stopped before. As the level of destruction increased rapidly, large-scale monitoring of the groups began. Helicopters appeared above the most heavily affected areas to conduct aerial surveys. From above, the movement routes of the boars became clearly visible between open ground and areas of crops that had already been damaged multiple times. Some groups became fully exposed while crossing large open spaces before moving deeper into areas with food sources. Along several major movement routes, hunters carrying bows and arrows began setting up ambushes to force the groups to move toward pre-planned areas. After many days of continuous tracking, the movement patterns of the boars were finally identified clearly. They almost always returned to the same travel corridors instead of changing locations randomly. Based on that pattern, trap systems were set up directly along the routes most frequently used by the animals. Large steel frames were firmly anchored into the ground with deep stakes in order to withstand the impact of many boars rushing in at the same time. The surrounding netting was pressed tightly against the ground so that no gaps remained. After the entire structure was completed, bait was placed deep inside to draw the groups fully into the controlled area. During the following nights, the entire area around the traps was continuously monitored by cameras. The first animals approached very slowly, repeatedly stopping to observe before moving closer to the bait area. They circled around the edge of the trap briefly, before gradually stepping inside. Once they detected no danger, The animals behind them quickly followed in small groups. The number inside steadily increased after each movement wave. Before long, several boars began pushing and competing for food in the center area, causing their level of caution to decrease noticeably over time. As soon as most of the group had gathered inside, the trap system was activated immediately. The steel gate slammed shut extremely quickly, blocking every escape route before the boars could react. Within seconds, the entire area turned chaotic as the trapped animals rushed in different directions, searching for a way out. Some slammed hard into the netting, but were unable to break through the structure that had already been firmly secured. Choosing the right moment allowed most of the group to be contained in a single operation. After the control process was completed, the boars were kept stable inside the system before being transported away from the area. As the number of boars decreased, many agricultural areas gradually became stable again, and the level of destruction also slowly declined over time.